Many of you have teenagers and you're wondering how to help them financially. We're going to talk about 5 best practices to help your teenager use a budget. This topic comes with kind of a lot of baggage for me because I felt like, we went through some financial challenges, some real financial challenges. And I was worried, I felt really worried that maybe that was the one area that I really didn't teach my children very well to budget.
Yeah.
And yet, as I talk to them now as adults, they're all really good about budgeting.
Better than we were.
Right. And I think part of it is the first strategy we're going to talk about is check your own attitude about budgeting. And
right.
I guess what I'm saying is that because we had some challenges and then we worked really hard at fixing some of those budgeting issues, our understanding, our relationship with money and how we use it and how we view it and the power that it has in our lives or doesn't have in our lives, that we modeled that for them. And so I can see how that's one of the very first things is that we talk about or monitor your own relationship, attitude about budgeting, and money.
This is probably a fundamental principle of parenting because our children are going to learn more from who we are and how we live than they ever will from what we say.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up first, Vicki. Let's take a look inside of ourselves and just be aware of it. Not to create shame or guilt.
No, and actually I think part of it is, and it kind of rolls into our next step, is to realize that budgeting is not to control us. So if we think of budget as, oh, I got to go do my budget again, like it's a miserable thing, that's what we're modeling. Help them see that budgeting actually frees them up, that they have complete control. It doesn't control, the budget does not control you. You control the budget and it helps give you control over what you want, how you're going to get the physical things that you want, the temporal things.
Have you noticed this about money? It goes away.
Yep. Comes and goes.
It doesn't stick around, and it's not supposed to. Money is supposed to flow. So if the money is in constant flow, who gets to decide where it flows? That's what a budget is all about. It's about declaring a boss. And either your money's going to run you or you're going to run your money. So let's decide who's in control. And at least for me, Vicki, that makes a difference when I think about budgeting because I have to admit some of my old thought patterns about budgeting was, oh, that's going to restrict me. It's going to tell me I can't spend money on this or that. No, it doesn't. It puts me in control. I get to be the boss.
It kind of changes some of the words you use. So instead of saying, I can't afford, instead it's, ooh, I'm not going to choose to spend my money that way. There's a difference.
A big difference. Along those same lines, Vicki, when you realize who's in control, when you declare who's the boss of the money, you can change your mind.
Be flexible.
Absolutely.
That is the best part of having a budget is being flexible.
You cannot spend the same dollar on 2 different things. It just doesn't work that way. You can choose, however, to move a dollar that you assign to this job over to this job because you're the boss. Just own it. And I think teenagers are already kind of concerned about who's running their life. So as parents, as we're trying to help our teenagers with this, we don't come in and say, you need to whatever. I think we come in and empower them to be the boss over their resources. That's going to feel very different.
And that's part of why we want to do a budget. They really do want to learn how to be in charge of their life. They want the control. We want them to take that control because we certainly still don't want to be in charge when they're 20 years old, right?
You don't want them eating your groceries at 35.
So part of helping them learn how to use a budget is provide their necessities and help them figure out how to pay for the rest or how to use the money they have to allocate it where they want and make choices. You know what? There are going to be hard choices, right? There are times.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, I think it's really a disservice if we let our kids grow up thinking that they never have to go without something they want. Now, I'm not talking their needs. I would never keep them from having the food that they need or things like that, right?
Can I just go over the freebies real quick?
Right. What are the freebies?
There are 5 freebies. Get clear about this because you have to provide this as a parent to minor children.
Right.
love, no matter what and even if, air, I know
Okay.
you don't provide it, but you can't deprive them of it, water,
Okay.
food, and shelter.
Okay.
Okay, those are the 5 freebies. Notice telecommunications isn't on the list.
And in that
Video
shelter
games.
is adequate clothing, adequate place to sleep, etc.
Right,
So
yes.
really, if you're providing the freebies for them, and then they want to get other things, help them find a source of income. It might be an allowance, it might be a job, whatever. But then help them budget so that they learn how to make choices about which things to get first, which things are most important to them.
Yes.
It's really empowering to them.
This has a whole lot to do with distinguishing between needs and wants, which is important for your budget too. So we become discerning about that. The other thing that we're doing here, Vicki, at this stage is we're creating a motivation or a need for the budgeting skill. The thing is, if you continue to provide everything for them, then why should they?
Why should they budget?
And I'm not saying, from a parental perspective, you can come up with 12 answers to that, why they should budget, right? If they can't come up with one good answer, then they're not going to do it.
And let me just add this too, that the whole concept of budgeting, we're talking it financially, but as you learn to budget, that concept, it goes with time, it goes with energy.
Any resource.
Any resource. And oh gosh, we could get into a whole podcast on itself on time management. But
yeah.
it really is about budgeting. And so let's learn that more simply where there's money and exchange, because those are easier to see than maybe the time management that's going to come later in adulthood.
Here's a financial, and maybe even a greater principle that it applies to things other than finance, kind of like what you were just saying. This principle has been shown to be so powerful, and it has to do with philanthropy and savings. Philanthropy and savings. I talk about this in Pathological Positivity in my book,
Right.
where I tell about the time when you and I were having some financial struggles and difficulties. Chapter 1 is called Lightning Strikes. It's all about that. And in this period of time, I was reading a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, where the primary premise was, he said first, give your penance to the gods. That's the way that he said it. This is philanthropy. It's donating. It's paying a tithe. And that's important because when we take whatever resources come into us, and we first earmark that for philanthropy, it changes the way we think about our money. But then the second point was, part of everything you make is yours to keep. And this is something that we hadn't budgeted for.
Right. We didn't understand the
prior to that.
Yeah.
And we'd always done service and contributions and
But
philanthropy.
not savings,
But we hadn't paid ourselves.
Right.
And one of the points that the author made, he says, what do you call a person who works as hard as you do and doesn't get paid?
That's
a slave.
Right. Yeah.
And that really struck me, because if I'm not paying myself, if we're not saving and keeping a part of everything that we make, then we are slaves. And who's going to pay us? Well, we have to go to the budget master, the person who's the boss in charge of the dollars.
Right.
See, this all ties back together to what we're talking about in terms of empowering our kids to take charge of this thing. But philanthropy and savings, powerful.
And it can be pretty simple. I had a friend once that just said, if somebody asks me at the counter, would you like to give $1 for a primary? If they ask me for it, I'm going to give it to them for the most part. And he just kind of made a habit of that. I've done that most of the time, because generally speaking, you're not going to notice $1 missed, right? But it just helps you realize that money is in a constant flow at all times for all people.
Right.
And you can more often than you think. Then let philanthropy
Yes.
be a part of your...
A lot of people believe in karma and how when you do good,
Right.
it comes back to you. I think that there's something to that. I think that it's also powerful the way that philanthropy and savings changes our own mindset.
Right.
And it changes the way that you manage the remaining dollars that are in your budget. You become more wise about it. You become more selective about it. There's a lot of great reasons to do that. Vicki, I'm going to defer to you on this last one, because you are so good at this, finding tools and platforms.
There are so many tools out there, and you can use any one you want. I found one that I like. We use it for our family, and we have, I think, all 4 of our kids
All of
use
our
it
kids
as
are
well.
using it.
And it's called YNAB. You Need a Budget. And
YNAB.
YNAB. But it doesn't matter what the tool is, just use a tool. And remember, it's a tool, because there are many times where I'll talk with, matter of fact, it was just maybe a month ago, one of my children, we're filming this at a time when we're still in the middle of the COVID issues, right? And so I had a child who financially things had kind of all fallen apart for him because they really didn't have any income for several months, and then tuition was coming up and things, and she was just so stressed out. She's like, I haven't even opened YNAB in forever, and she was just feeling overwhelmed. I said, let's just wipe it out and start a brand new budget. So we sat down together.
That's the flexibility.
Yeah, just being flexible. And it's just a tool. It doesn't need to control her. And so I said, well, then let's take control of it, right? And so we just took her balance from the bank, opened up a new budget, and we just created it. So find whatever tool works for you, and then be flexible with it. Remember, it's your tool. It doesn't control you. You can be flexible, start over. It is just there to help you make the goals and change your relationship with money.
Right. And it becomes your resource. I love what you said about you're the one who's in charge of this. It doesn't control you. You use it to control your life. We love being on your team. And if you don't have a coach already to work with, we would love to be more intimately involved with you in that coaching. We have coaching and other resources available to you. Check it out at go.liveonpurposecentral.com.
Street alone. Her head was down, face locked onto her phone.